Hi everyone, welcome to Translation Advanced. This is our Intro to Interpreting course. We're going to go through week 1. We're starting with the Essential Guide to Interpreting. So let's get going. So what will we be covering in this video? Number 1, we're going to be defining interpreting. Then we're going to talk about the interpreter's role. After that, we'll go through the key differences between interpreters and translators. Then we're going to go through just a quick skills chart. Then we will talk about skills that every interpreter must master. And finally, we're going to briefly talk about the overlapping skills between interpreters and translators. So what is the role of an interpreter? An interpreter's role is to convey in one language literally what has been said in another without additions, omissions, or distortion. This is very important because some people think that we paraphrase when we interpret, and that's not the case. What we're trying to do is convey a message without adding anything, without deleting anything, or without changing anything. Why is this? This is very important because as an interpreter, you do not have a voice. You are transferring a message from a target language into a source language, no exceptions. And we'll talk about this more in detail when we go through the areas where we interpret and the different modes. So what are the key differences between interpreting and translating? Well, the first one is very simple. Interpreters work with spoken language and translators work with written text. And some people call us translators. I mean, we don't get upset. It's just the fact that people don't really know what we do. But that's the one small difference, that as interpreters, we are changing a message verbally from one language to another, and translators do it in written text. Number 2. Interpreters require different skills such as listening, memory, and oral communication skills, while translators focus on reading comprehension, writing proficiency, and research skills. So even though we use the word translators to apply to both interpreters and translators, we really do two completely different activities which require different skills. And number 3, that interpreters perform work on the spot, while translators have time to research and edit. And that's another one of the differences. We usually are on site or virtually, but we are doing our interpreting work real time. That just means in the moment, while translators have time to research, to edit, and to be more thorough with the choices that they make in terms of language. Now let's go through this skill chart so that you guys see the differences between interpreters and translators. And let's see. So first of all, interpreters work in real time, which we just talked about. That means that you have to think quickly. Translators work with written text, so they have additional time to do revisions. Also, interpreters need strong oral communication skills versus translators who need excellent writing skills. Interpreters also often work on-site or remotely in live settings, while translators usually work independently with more time flexibility because they're not doing it on the spot. Now, interpreters use memory, note-taking, and multitasking, and translators depend on their research skills and editing tools. And finally, interpreters focus on live interpersonal communication, while translators are focused on creating a polished written product. So what are skills that every interpreter must master? Let's see. The first one is your language fluency and accuracy, of course. Language fluency is very important, and we're going to go through in the next course why it is so important. Some people think that just because you speak 2 languages, you're able to have that fluency, but it really has to do with your command of the language, and we'll talk about in detail later. So number 2, memory and note-taking skills. This is very important for interpreters, and these are things that we really don't have until we start interpreting. So for memory and note-taking, we rely on practice. The more you practice, the better that you will become at all the memory and note-taking skills, and we'll go through both of those skills thoroughly. Number 3, we're gonna be very good at listening and comprehension. Listening especially, in my opinion, that's one of the most important things that an interpreter has, it's that we are very good at listening. And you have to, and later on you'll see, because when we go through the modes of interpretation, you'll be able to see that if you're not focused, if you're not listening, this is not like one of those jobs that you can just do on the fly and that you can not be focused and paying attention in. And that those skills are very important. Number 4, cultural competence. This is important because as interpreters, for example, I am from Mexico, but I need to have an understanding of the words that are used by people from Colombia, from Venezuela, from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, from people from Spain. I mean, from all the different countries that speak Spanish, so that I'm able to interpret faithfully. Okay, number 5, stress management and multitasking. This is very important. One, and we'll talk about stress management later on in the course, because it's very important for us to do a little bit of self-care. I know that a lot of people don't talk about these things, but it's very important in certain settings, and we will cover this thoroughly because I think that is one of those things that is just very important. Now, number 6, ethical decision making. This is important, guys, because as interpreters, and usually in most of the interpreting fields where you need a certification, they require you to take ethical classes so that you know what behaviors we need to excel at. Ethics is one of them. I think it's very important, and it will also facilitate your interpreting if you have a knowledge of the ethics surrounding the area of interpreting where you're working. Now, number 7, public speaking and voice skills. All of these skills also are acquired, you guys. So public speaking, even if you're not comfortable public speaking at first, I mean, if you're not able to do that as an interpreter, I mean, this is just non-negotiable. Public speaking is very important, and your voice skills are very important, because even in the different modes of interpreting, which again we will cover later, you're going to have to be able to regulate your voice. And these voice skills, again, you have to practice in order to get very good at them. And lastly, technical skills. And this, guys, it just depends on you having knowledge in the area that you're working in. Obviously, as a conference interpreter, you're going to have to be familiar with that equipment. If you're interpreting in court, you have to familiarize yourself with that equipment as well. So we will cover all of this in detail, but these are the main skills that we should have. Okay, now what are the overlapping skills between interpreters and translators? Well, we covered it already. You have to possess near native fluency in at least 2 languages. So in order to interpret, you have to be fluent in, for example, I'm from Mexico, so my language pair is English-Spanish, and I interpret English to Spanish and Spanish to English. There are some interpreters that choose to just go in one direction. So there are interpreters that specialize in only English to Spanish, and there are interpreters that specialize in only Spanish to English. I do both, but that's a personal choice. Another skill is you have to understand professional ethics, including confidentiality and impartiality. This is very important, which we will cover once we go into the different areas in which you interpret, because these are going to be very important once we get in a judicial setting versus a medical setting, for example. And finally, you have to demonstrate cultural competence and sensitivity. And there are some areas where this is more important than others. But in general, the cultural competency is just going to help you interpret. The sensitivity is going to help you in certain settings where you do have to be mindful of it. Okay, so what we covered is the definition of interpreting. We went through the roles of an interpreter. We went through the key differences between interpreters and translators. We went through the skill chart. We went through the skills that every interpreter must master. And we covered also the overlapping skills between interpreters and translators. So that is just basics, just so you have a general understanding of interpreting. So I'll see you in the next module.